Strengthening NATO. President Obama pushes Western leaders to build stronger resistance to terror threats. Self-sacrifice. An American doctor travels to Liberia knowing he might contract the Ebola virus, and he does. Bishop killer. A Guatemalan army captain imprisoned for murdering a Catholic bishop faces new charges. And Smokin' Joe. A statue of Philadelphia's boxing legend Joe Frazier soon to join the likeness of Rocky Balboa. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, September 3rd, 2014. Good evening from Washington, D.C. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Brian Patrick with your news now. President Obama is in Europe tonight, responding to the actions of Islamic State militants against Americans and to aggression within Europe. We have more on ISIS in just a moment. But first, Jason Calvi is at the White House tonight reporting on the president's verbal attack on Russia today. Jason?
Brian, Obama is facing mounting criticism that he's been light on Vladimir Putin, but today Obama had tough words for the Russian president and big promises for NATO allies who begin their summit tomorrow.
President Obama says Russia is an aggressor. He says Russian forces that have moved into Ukraine are not on a peacekeeping mission.
Just as we never accepted the occupation and illegal annexation of the Baltic nations, we will not accept Russia's occupation and illegal annexation of Crimea or any part of Ukraine.
Obama brings this message to the presidents and people of the Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, all formerly under Soviet control. The president says the U.S. will defend its NATO allies.
So if, in such a moment, you ever ask again who'll come to help, you'll know the answer. The NATO alliance, including the armed forces of the United States of America right here, present now.
Despite that promise, Obama offered no new plans to punish Russia, except through sanctions. He also said again that he opposes military intervention in Ukraine.
The president really needs to take concrete steps. He's had a very difficult summer in foreign policy.
Joseph Wood is a former European and national security advisor to Vice President Dick Cheney. He says the president needs to unite NATO allies. Each has their own distinct relationship with Russia.
NATO, from all of its history, from the 1940s on, has been faced with these kinds of conflicts and these difficulties. But the role of the American president has always been to put his fist down and say, now it's time to come together with these solutions, and I need you to take the political steps, Europeans, to make them happen and strengthen your defense.
And it's expected that one of those solutions will be more NATO troops and equipment into Eastern Europe, close to Russia, ready to respond on a moment's notice. And Brian, I should add that today, Ukraine and Russia both saying that they're working on a ceasefire deal.
All right, thank you. Jason Calvi from the White House tonight. Today, the president confirmed a video released by terrorists in Syria showing the beheading of another American journalist is authentic. He also vowed the murder will stiffen U.S. determination to fight the Islamic State's reign of terror. Wyatt Goolsby joining us now with more on that.
Brian, that resolve to fight the Islamic State or ISIS was confirmed today by the Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel, saying it's the U.S. mission to destroy ISIS. He also said the U.S. knows of over 100 American passport holders working with ISIS. Also today, the first reaction by the president over another example of ISIS brutality.
It was just before President Obama boarded Air Force One for this week's NATO summit that ISIS released a video showing the second beheading of an American journalist in just 2 weeks' time. After landing in Estonia, President Obama made a statement expressing his condolences to Steven Sotloff's family, promising to destroy ISIS so it's no longer a threat.
Those who make the mistake of harming Americans will learn that we will not forget and that our reach is long and that justice will be served.
Vice President Joe Biden upped the sentiment earlier today.
We take care of those who are grieving, and when that's finished, they should know we will follow them to the gates of hell until they are brought to justice.
Members of Congress from both sides of the aisle are pushing for fast action from the president when it comes to the terrorist group.
I think in terms of what the president as well as our government must do is to continue with an enduring determination to go after the Islamic State and to destroy it, and that's going to take some time, but I think we can do that.
As the debate brews over how to respond, Sotloff's family says they're grieving privately. James Foley's mother is asking the world to embrace the Sotloffs. Her son was the other American killed by ISIS militants.
I really feel Stephen and James were there to unify our country, bring our world together. So we are just heartbroken.
The death of both journalists has prompted the president to send additional military personnel to Iraq. The 350 troops will not be in a combat role, but will protect U.S. facilities around the country. Brian?
All right, Wyatt. Elbridge Colby from the Center for New American Security joining us now. President Obama taking on Russia today, Bridge. What is motivating his detour to Estonia?
Well, I think the president really wanted to show resolve both to the Estonians and the Baltic states, the Eastern Europeans more generally, as well as to the Russians, that the U.S. is committed to the security of the Eastern European states, and particularly, again, the Baltic states.
What's been the reaction of President Putin?
Well, it's been interesting. He's been using some pretty bellicose rhetoric over the last few weeks. I think at a summer camp the other day, he talked about don't mess with Russia. But today it was a little interesting. He was in Mongolia, and he's been pushing a ceasefire plan with the president of Ukraine. So he's kind of, I think, both trying to be tough, but also trying to get a step ahead of NATO and President Obama in Ukraine.
Is the cooperation between the U.S. and Russia on non-proliferation of nuclear items or nuclear weapons, is that threatened?
I would say it is. It sort of depends on what you're talking about. In terms of arms control, that is relationships between the U.S. and Russia on nuclear weapons and so forth. That is, but that's partially Russia. They've been violating the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty from the Cold War. And so I'd say arms control is in trouble for some good reasons. In terms of trying to avoid other countries getting nuclear weapons like Iran, we haven't seen as much of a decline there, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's getting tougher sledding recently.
Let's move on to ISIS and the threat that ISIS presents. How will that play into or detract from what goes on normally at this NATO summit?
Well, this is probably the busiest and most important NATO summit in some time, and they've got a lot on the agenda, including, most importantly, probably Russia. But ISIS is going to play a big role, and of course the president is trying to get a number of the European countries to play an active role. The Brits have been forceful on this, but some of the others are kind of lagging behind. So I think it's going to play an important role.
Usually some big news comes out of these summits. What do you expect from this one?
Well, I think there's going to be this announcement of a rapid reaction force, which is basically not basing traditional NATO ally troops in Eastern Europe, but a beefed up, more quick response force to help assure the Poles and the Baltic states. I think you'll also see something on cyber. The alliance is worried about the potential of cyber attack, and more broadly thinking about Russia and dealing with also the challenge not only of sort of a big threat, but also the sort of little green men, the hybrid warfare threat. So I think you'll see a couple of things coming out of the summit.
Has NATO neglected its own territory? Has it been weakened?
I would say NATO has, to some extent, neglected it, partially out of a sense that the old threats were really gone, but also out of, lassitude, if you will. But I think, they're finally starting to make moves on beefing up defense plans and defense capabilities in the newer members of NATO in Eastern Europe, the former Warsaw Pact countries. So that will be, but that's been motivated by what the Russians have been up to. So.
All right, from the Center for a New American Security, Elbridge Colby, thanks again. We appreciate your insight tonight.
Thanks very much, Brian.
Now, some of the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. John Kerry, Hillary Rodham Clinton, Colin Powell, Madeleine Albright, James Baker III, and Henry Kissinger all joined today to celebrate a special groundbreaking at the State Department. The past and present secretaries of state gathered to break ground for the United States Diplomacy Center. The museum will commemorate the achievements of American statesmanship. The center will occupy 40,000 square feet at the State Department. It will include interactive exhibits and some artifacts, and will also offer educational programs. The American missionary woman sickened with Ebola believes an experimental drug, her medical care, and her faith helped save her life. Nancy Wrightbull says she didn't know whether she would live or die.
I had no clue what was going to happen. Of course, I knew what the outcome could be. And yet, there was no fear. There was just this sense of the Lord's peace and presence with us. And I thought, whether I live or whether I die, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay.
We are so very thankful. I am so very thankful that this beautiful woman is still with me. She is the best part of my life. And I told her so many times and continue to tell her she is the most beautiful woman I know. And I love her with all my heart.
What a moving moment. Another doctor with that same missionary group called SIM has tested positive for Ebola in Liberia. Dr. Rick Sacra volunteered to attend non-Ebola patients that the group normally serves there. Knowing the danger he faced from possible exposure to the deadly virus, he went to West Africa anyway. Pope Francis remembers Christians in Iraq today. At his weekly general audience, the Holy Father encouraged Christians under threat from Islamic militants. He called them the heart of the church.
La Chiesa soffre con voi e la Chiesa è fiera di voi.
The Pope telling Iraqi Christians the church suffers with them and is proud of them. Thousands of Christians have been forced from their homes by Islamic militants. It's an issue the Holy Father follows closely, previously telling our Alan Holdren it is legitimate to use force to stop the militants. He said, though, the international community should decide how to do that. A Guatemalan army captain convicted of killing a Catholic bishop has now been charged with money laundering and organized crime. Byron Lima is accused of extorting money from other inmates. He is serving time for killing Bishop Juan Jose Garardi in 1998. The 75-year-old bishop was bludgeoned to death after blaming the military for most of the 200,000 deaths in Guatemala's 36-year civil war. A Detroit man will spend at least the next 17 years in prison for killing an unarmed woman on his front porch. Prosecutors say 19-year-old Rainisha McBride was seeking help after a car accident. She pounded on Theodore Wafer's door late at night last November. Wafer said he feared for his life and fired through the door in self-defense. The judge disagreed.
In order to take someone's life based on fear, it has to be honest and reasonable, and someone knocking or pounding on your door at 4:30 in the morning rarely creates an honest and reasonable situation that would justify taking another person's life. So what do we have? One life gone and one life ruined.
Before his sentencing, Wafer asked the victim's family for forgiveness.
I apologize from the bottom of my heart. And I am truly sorry for your loss.
A jury rejected Wafer's self-defense claim, finding him guilty of second-degree murder, manslaughter, and unlawful gun use. The trial gained public attention in part because Wafer is white and the victim was black. A rare win today for supporters of traditional marriage. A federal judge upholds the choice of Louisiana voters to ban gay marriage in 2004. The ruling is the first time a state ban has been upheld since the U.S. Supreme Court struck down parts of the Defense of Marriage Act. The decision breaks a string of 20 consecutive rulings overturning bans on so-called same-sex marriage. Groups supporting the redefinition of marriage to include gay couples say they will appeal this decision. Well, the number of immigrant children crossing the southern border continues to drop. The Customs and Border Protection Agency says today that agents found just over 3,100 children last month, compared with more than 5,400 in July. In June, more than 2,000 unaccompanied children were crossing the border every week. Most are from Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala. About 66,000 children have crossed the border since last October. Coming up, laws restricting abortion are on hold in 2 states. The president of National Right to Life weighs in. And a new study on survival rates for women who undergo a double mastectomy. On Wednesday, September 3rd, thanks for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick. A major drugstore is kicking the habit today. CVS stores will no longer sell cigarettes or any tobacco products. CVS says the move could cost about $2 billion in revenue. The company plans to expand into more health care and related services, hoping to make up at least some of the difference. A name change to CVS Health is designed to promote this new image. The decision to stop selling cigarettes was actually announced in February. CVS is the nation's second largest drugstore chain. Double mastectomies do not improve survival odds for patients with cancer in one breast. That's what a new study has found. The procedure is increasingly used to treat cancer in a single breast, but it doesn't always result in fewer deaths. A study of almost 200,000 women showed nearly identical 10-year survival rates for women who choose removal of the tumor and radiation instead of the double mastectomy. The research was published in this week's Journal of the American Medical Association. Well, 2 states have seen setbacks in abortion restriction laws this past week. In Texas, a federal judge ruled Friday new abortion restrictions are unconstitutional. The judge's reasoning: the obstacles to getting an abortion, quote, have reached a tipping point. These restrictions would hold abortion clinics to the same standards as hospital operating rooms. In Louisiana, a U.S. district judge issued a temporary restraining order blocking enforcement of a new abortion law. The law requires abortion clinic physicians to obtain hospital admitting privileges within 30 miles of their clinics or offices. That law remains in effect, but physicians cannot be penalized for breaking it. We welcome back Carol Tobias, president of National Right to Life. Are you disheartened by these rulings, Carol?
Disheartened, yes, but surprised, no. Pro-lifers elect candidates who get into the state legislatures, they pass great pro-life legislation, and then the pro-aborts come in and challenge the laws, and it depends on the judge they pick. Sometimes they can select their judges. So surprised, no.
Let's look at the one that requires hospitals or these clinics to have really a surgery suite. What are the standards now for these abortion clinics? Why are these laws necessary?
There really is no standard. That's the problem. We have seen and heard stories of women going into the abortion facilities, having some problem during the surgery, and the ambulance can't bring, when it is called, cannot bring a gurney down the hallway because the hallway is too narrow. Maybe the doors are even locked. I mean, they can't get the woman into the ambulance to get her to the hospital. We've heard stories like in the Gosnell case where there were cat feces on the stairs, the women were given bloody blankets, the instruments were not cleansed, sterilized between surgeries from patient to patient. There really are no standards for the abortion industry.
And it is a surgical procedure. I just don't understand how they could get away with this for so long.
Well, they've tried to say that abortion should be treated like any other medical procedure, and yet they don't want any limits on abortion. They don't think women should have to do the informed consent, get the informed consent conditions before they go through the abortion procedure. They think it should be someone other than a doctor that does the abortion. The National Abortion Federation went into Gosnell's clinic and said that these conditions are horrible. We don't want him to be a member of our organization. But they didn't report him to anybody, the American Medical Association or the Pennsylvania Health Board. They were more concerned with making sure that abortion is being conducted and that the babies are dying rather than the safety of the women. So we do need these kinds of laws.
Is it about safety or is it about reducing the number of abortions?
It really is both. I mean, I think some legislators would vote for these kinds of regulations because they really do want to see the procedure safer for women, that the standards should have to meet basic minimum health and safety standards as other ambulatory surgical centers.
But the ultimate goal would be to reduce abortion.
Well, certainly, if that's a side effect, because you're saying abortion has to be safer and women would say that they aren't going to get the abortion or that the abortion facility closes, that means babies live. That's a positive for us.
These were last-minute judicial rulings, roadblocks to these new laws. Is that a good use or proper use of our judicial system?
Our founding fathers said that there's a checks and balances system in our government. I'm not sure they quite envisioned it being used in this way. But it's not a surprise because the courts are the best friend for the pro-aborts because the legislatures are elected by the people and they're passing great legislation.
The president of National Right to Life, Carol Tobias, thank you for being with us.
My pleasure.
Well, as the global warming debate heats up, New England's seafood industry is taking a hit from an alarming warming trend off Maine's coast. Catherine Zeltner reports.
Diane Cowan has been tromping through the muddy ground of coastal Maine for 22 years. Her mission? Count the young lobsters that reside under rocks or in small tidal pools.
The problem we've been having is that sometimes we have fewer and fewer dates when we can access those lobsters.
That's due to higher and higher water levels in the Gulf of Maine, a region of the Atlantic Ocean that stretches from Cape Cod to Nova Scotia.
We think about cod, we think about lobster, and it's true. It's a really important ecosystem. It's one that's been productive for a long, long time, and where a lot of people are making their living off of it.
But that ecosystem is changing rapidly. Scientists say the Gulf of Maine is warming faster than 99% of the world's oceans.
We're warming 8 times faster than our long-term average warming. And it means that it's been a real shock to the ecosystem. So we've seen, really big changes in the ecosystem. They've happened really, really quickly.
Some species of fish and other marine life that used to live in more southern waters are moving northward. The lobster population has grown so much that prices have tumbled to their lowest level in 2 decades. Researchers are looking at a number of possibilities.
Exactly what's caused that warming trend is still something that we're working on.
But that's little comfort to Diane Cowan as she pursues her own work.
100 years from now, somebody might understand what I'm seeing a lot better than I do.
The warming trend already a rallying cry for environmental activists who say it's important for the debate on global climate change. Catherine Zeltner, EWTN News Nightly.
Up next, move over Rocky. Philly's fictional fighter will soon face a challenge from a real-life boxing hero. Thanks for joining us on this Wednesday evening. I'm Brian Patrick with EWTN News Nightly, and red pandas may be a step farther away from extinction since the birth of one of these rare cubs in Nashville. This furry creature's arrival at a Nashville zoo this summer is a first for the wildlife park. Red pandas are native to mountainous parts of Asia. They're considered vulnerable to extinction because of habitat destruction. This little guy makes his exhibit debut later in the fall. For now, he's just staying close to his mom. And for the first time in 20 years, a female white rhino has been born in Israel. Her birth was greatly anticipated since her species is classified as near threatened of extinction. Conservation groups say only about 20,000 white rhinos were living wild as of 2010. Well, Philadelphia is famous for many things: the Declaration of Independence, the Liberty Bell, the Rocky movies. Well, that fictional fighter's statue will soon be joined by another, a world champion boxer and hometown hero. The Rocky statue is one of Philadelphia's biggest tourist attractions. But the fictional fighter is about to face a new challenger in the form of a statue honoring the late boxing champ Smokin' Joe Frazier.
I think it would be much bigger than Rocky. Rocky is great, it's a movie. But Joe Frazier's real, and he's Philadelphia.
Artist Stephen Lane is putting the finishing touches on a 9-foot-tall clay version of the man who famously outslugged Muhammad Ali to win the heavyweight title in 1971. The statue captures Frazier in mid-punch, reflecting the personality of the fighter and the city he called home.
He's right in the thick of the work of what he's doing, and at the same time it's a moment of achievement for him. That pose of glory of the Rocky pose, I don't think that's quite the vibe of Philadelphia.
Frazier, who was also an Olympic gold medalist, died of liver cancer 3 years ago at age 67. Efforts to immortalize the hometown hero took a few blows, including fundraising problems and the death of the original sculptor, but now the project is back on track.
I think it's good to honor him that way and then find other good ways to honor Joe as time moves on.
So move over, Rocky Balboa.
It's a bit silly to have a statue of someone that was never a professional boxer. They should have a statue of a great boxer, of Joe Frazier.
The Frazier statue is slated to be cast in bronze and installed near the Philadelphia sports stadiums next spring. I remember that matchup between Smokin' Joe Frazier and the great one, Muhammad Ali, in 1971. Well, that's it for tonight. Until tomorrow, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. You can watch again anytime on EWTN's YouTube page. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, I'm Brian Patrick. Thank you again for watching tonight. Good night, and God bless you.